The Zephyrian research ship, Curiosity's Blade, hovered silently over Earth's atmosphere, cloaked from primitive human detection. Inside its sterile, dimly lit labs, a dozen scientists gathered around a holographic display pulsing with streams of genetic code. Dr. Velith, lead biogeneticist, leaned closer, his silver eyes narrowing as he studied the DNA sequence freshly extracted from a random Earth specimen. They had come expecting to find weaknesses, structural flaws, biological inefficiencies, errors in evolutionary design. To the Zephyrians, humans were simple, fragile creatures, barely evolved from their primal ancestors. Yet, the data told another story. Deep within the tangled double helix, past the common genetic markers and basic survival traits, something new shimmered. Patterns too deliberate, too structured to be mere evolutionary chance. This cannot be a flaw, Velith murmured, magnifying the sequence. The strands shifted, reordering themselves in mesmerizing fractal loops. Other scientists gathered closer, whispers breaking the usual stoic silence. It looked almost like an instruction set. A dormant code. Weaponized. At first, the crew dismissed the idea. Genetic anomalies were common among lesser species. But as they ran deeper simulations, the truth unraveled like a dark secret. These hidden genes were dormant systems, capacities for abilities no primitive species should possess. Telekinetic potential, bioelectric field manipulation, cellular regeneration beyond anything Zephyrian science could replicate. Worse, these sequences weren't localized to one individual. They appeared scattered across the entire human genome like ticking time bombs, ready to be awakened under specific conditions. The air in the lab grew tense. Have they been engineered? Dr. Nixis asked, her voice trembling slightly. Velith shook his head slowly. No, they evolved. Or something, encoded them long ago. Before they forgot. He stared at the DNA like it might stare back. Curiosity turned to fear as theories spiraled. What if humans had once been far more powerful, their abilities sealed away by necessity? Or worse, forgotten entirely? What if this planet, so seemingly benign, was actually a cradle of weapons? The council aboard Curiosity's Blade demanded answers. Expeditions were ordered. Samples from different continents were collected, tested, cross-referenced. The results were the same everywhere. Hidden within every bloodline was a potential arsenal waiting in silence. The Zephyrians debated fiercely. Some argued to abandon the mission immediately. Others insisted they could control and manipulate the traits once discovered. They don't even know, one scholar scoffed. They're infants crawling over a loaded plasma cannon. But Velith felt a deep unease he couldn't shake. They were meddling with forces they did not fully understand. Still, Zephyrian pride outweighed caution. Protocol demanded experimentation. A subject was selected, a captured human from a remote settlement, sedated and unaware of the galaxy watching. Velith oversaw the project personally, standing behind layers of reinforced containment fields. On the console before him, he placed his slender fingers on the activation pad. All it would take was a small genetic pulse, an energetic nudge to wake the dormant sequence. They needed to know. They needed to see. With a soft click, the pulse fired into the human's bloodstream. For a moment, nothing happened. The human remained limp, breathing shallowly. Then slowly, the heart monitor spiked. The human's fingers twitched. Muscles tensed. Energy readings from the chamber began to climb exponentially. Lights flickered. The human's eyes snapped open, glowing faintly with an unnatural sheen. The containment field wavered, alarms blaring. Velith stepped back instinctively, heart pounding as the air in the room grew heavy, thick with unseen pressure. Inside the chamber, the human rose from the slab, body trembling as invisible forces rippled off him like heat waves. Machinery creaked, metal groaned, and without warning, the entire chamber exploded outward, shattered by an invisible force. Scientists scrambled for cover as debris flew. Emergency protocols failed one after another. In the chaos, Velith saw the human standing amidst the wreckage, a strange calm in his expression, as if some ancient instinct had been reawakened. He raised a hand, and the air between them distorted violently, sending a shockwave that smashed the secondary barrier like paper. Velith and his team fled down the corridor, terror eclipsing their scientific curiosity. Security droids rushed in, but were torn apart mid-air, their components raining down like sparks. The human didn't pursue. He simply turned, leapt impossibly high, and disappeared into the darkened halls of the ship. Staggering to his feet, Velith wiped blood from his brow and stared at the wreckage. In all their arrogance, They had assumed themselves the masters. But now he saw the truth burning behind his fear. Humans weren't broken. Humans weren't weak. They were sleeping giants, and the Zephyrians had just kicked the hornet's nest. Somewhere, deep within their genetic memories, humanity had been built not as prey, but as predators. And now, the awakening had begun.
The ship trembled under the weight of chaos. Sirens wailed in panicked succession, red lights bathing the sleek metallic corridors in an ominous glow. Sprinted through the twisting halls of Curiosity's blade, his mind racing even faster than his legs. Around him, the consequences of their arrogance unfolded brutally. Walls crumpled inward, crushed by unseen forces. Fellow scientists, once confident and cold, now screamed in terror, scrambling for shelter that no longer existed. The human, once their passive subject, had become a living storm. No weapon deployed seemed to even slow him down. Plasma turrets melted into slag before they could fire, and security meches were torn apart by invisible hands before they could raise a defense. Somewhere, deep within the bowels of the ship, the unleashed human moved like a phantom, swift and devastating. Crashed into the central control chamber, where Commandant barked orders into the air, trying to organize a defense. His crew scrambled at their stations, pulling up blueprints, activating containment protocols, rerouting energy to damaged sectors. When spotted, his lip curled into a snarl. "What did you awaken?" he demanded. Gasping for breath, could only shake his head. "We didn't create it. We only woke it up." Slammed a fist against the console. "Then you will help me put it back to sleep." He turned to his officers. "Seal the lower decks. Vent atmosphere if you must. This anomaly cannot reach the bridge." Orders were executed without question. Watched, horror mounting, as entire sectors of the ship were sacrificed to trap one human. But it was futile. Screens displayed the creature's movements, or at least the devastation left in his wake. Sections of the ship that should have been, suddenly roared back to life as the human's power stabilized failing systems, instinctively weaving energy back into matter, defying the laws of physics themselves. "He's adapting," whispered, realization dawning. "The genetic code isn't just awakening abilities. It's evolving, responding to threats in real time." Stared at him and comprehending. Before he could respond, the ship shuddered violently. The main corridor leading to the control chamber buckled inward with a scream of tortured matter. The human was coming. Emergency bulkheads slammed down, sealing off the chamber. Defensive drones activated, filling the air with a whine as energy weapons span to life. Every in the room braced for a siege. But when the human arrived, it wasn't with a roar, it was with eerie silence. The matter of the bulkhead liquefied, flowing away like water to reveal the figure standing calmly in the breach. His eyes, still burning faintly, swept over the room. For a moment, everything froze. No one moved. No one breathed. The human tilted his head slightly, studying them as if deciding whether they were even worth the effort. Acted first, barking a kill command. The drones fired in unison, beams of cutting light converging on the intruder. The human raised one hand lazily, and the beams stopped, hanging like frozen rivers of molten gold. With a flex of his fingers, the energy reversed, ripping back toward the drones and annihilating them in a blinding pulse. Officers screamed and scrambled backward. Drew his personal sidearm, a weapon capable of burning a hole through solid starship alloy. He fired. The blast struck the human. Smoke billowed. For a heartbeat, hope surged in the chamber. But when the smoke cleared, the human remained standing, untouched. He raised both hands now, and the air itself twisted. Was ripped from the ground, armor and body crumpling as if caught in an invisible vice. Bones snapped audibly before he was hurled against the far wall, a lifeless heap. The surviving fell to their knees, instinctively recognizing power far beyond their own. Stood frozen, heart hammering, as the human turned toward him. And then, something strange happened. The glow in the human's eyes dimmed slightly. His expression softened. Instead of killing, as he had the others, he spoke a single word, rough but intelligible, why? The question struck, harder than any weapon could have. Trembling, he stepped forward slightly, hands raised in a gesture of peace. We thought you were weak, he whispered. The human's lip curled in a grim smile. You were wrong. Before could say more, the human turned and disappeared down the corridor, moving toward the docking bays. In the stunned silence that followed, sank to his knees. Around him, the control chamber lay in ruins, symbols of superiority shattered beyond repair. He understood, now, with a certainty that chilled him to his core. They hadn't just awakened a weapon. They had awakened a reckoning. And there was no protocol, no science, no firepower in the galaxy that could put this genie back in its bottle. Humanity was no longer sleeping. And soon, the entire universe would know it.
The escape pods fired into the void, streaks of silver against the endless black, but none of the Zephyrian survivors aboard Curiosity's blade looked back. They had seen enough. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, in hidden labs and citadels scattered among the stars, alarms began to sound. Reports flowed in, unbelievable ones, describing a human breaking containment, defeating armed security, manipulating energy fields with his mind, and dismantling one of the Empire's greatest research vessels. The Council of Intellects, the supreme governing body of the Zephyrian Collective, assembled in emergency session. High Chancellor Valtris slammed a fist against the conference table, the sound echoing through the grand chamber. We were searching for genetic flaws, he snarled, voice shaking with fury. Instead we found this. Around him, nervous faces stared back. Scholars, generals, diplomats, they all knew what the awakening of this one human meant. If others like him existed, their entire dominion was under threat. Already, the situation was spiraling out of control. Surveillance teams on occupied worlds reported strange phenomena. In the labor colonies of Sarlon IV, human workers once docile and broken had begun moving with unnatural coordination, as if guided by an unseen force. Weapons malfunctioned when turned against them. Guards collapsed, not from visible blows, but as if crushed by pure willpower. On Veron Prime, a human child was seen lifting a ground transport into the air before calmly walking away, leaving military units paralyzed with fear. Valtris's advisors babbled explanations: genetic evolution, quantum anomalies, breaches in psychological conditioning, but none had answers. Worse still, every attempt to recapture the awakened humans failed spectacularly. Strike teams simply disappeared without a trace. Surveillance drones short-circuited the moment they locked onto targets. Cities began to whisper in the shadows about a human ascension, and fear, real, contagious fear, spread through the Zephyrian population. The humans themselves seemed confused by their new abilities. But confusion soon gave way to something more dangerous: purpose. Underground networks, once dedicated to mere survival, transformed overnight into coordinated resistance cells. Messages, encoded in frequencies the Zephyrians couldn't intercept, rippled across planets. We are awake. We remember who we are. We will not kneel. In a secret war room on the Zephyrian capital world, generals debated desperate options. We must strike before they organize fully, one barked. Deploy null fields, genetic dampeners, brainwave disruptors. Everything we have. Another, older general shook his head grimly. It's too late. They're adapting faster than we can predict. Every weapon we use, they absorb, learn, and overcome. What we face is not mutation. It's evolution weaponized. Valtris refused to believe it. They are primitives, he roared. Barely capable of spaceflight when we found them. Their minds are weak, their societies fractured. A scientist spoke quietly, but with steel in his voice. Not anymore. He threw up a hologram, showing human DNA strands blooming with new structures, glowing with unnatural light. They are becoming something else. Something beyond our models. Beyond our understanding. Across the galaxy, human enclaves that had once cowered in silence now stood defiant. On frontier planets, humans rallied under a symbol that hadn't been seen in centuries. A simple blue circle over a golden star, Earth's forgotten emblem, reborn. Even enslaved worlds where humans were a minority began to rise, their presence igniting revolts that spread like wildfire. The Zephyrians attempted to deploy their deadliest weapons, planetary pacifiers capable of sterilizing entire biospheres. They unleashed them on human strongholds without hesitation.
But when the dust cleared, they found the humans still standing, untouched, the weapons rendered inert before impact, as if reality itself had bent to protect them. Worse, in some cases, the very weapons turned back on their creators, detonating Zephyrian warships and crumbling orbital stations. Desperation set in. Some Zephyrian commanders began abandoning human-held sectors altogether, declaring them lost. Others attempted diplomacy, offering peace treaties and autonomy in exchange for a return to the old order. The humans answered with silence, followed by swift, surgical strikes that left negotiation teams scattered as ash on the wind. In hidden chambers, old legends resurfaced. Stories from the early days of the Zephyrian expansion, when the first scouts reported finding Earth. They spoke of a world rich in life, yes, but also warnings. Strange fluctuations in energy fields, anomalous readings of psychic potential. These reports had been buried, dismissed as anomalies. Now the truth was clear. Earth had not been weak. Earth had been sleeping. And now its children were awake, carrying within them the full, terrible force of evolution's gamble. Valtris stared at the chaos unfolding across the strategic maps, icons of human rebellion blooming like bloodstains. He felt something he had not experienced in centuries, true paralyzing fear. "Initiate total lockdown," he commanded. "Recall all fleets. Cut off all external systems. We will wait them out. They cannot survive without the infrastructure we provide." The room fell into grim silence. They all knew the truth he dared not say. The humans didn't need Zephyrian infrastructure. They would build their own, or tear down everything that remained. As the hologram flickered and the council descended into frantic argument, a final message, somehow piercing through the most secure channels, appeared on every screen. Simple, chilling, inevitable. You thought you could break us. You only made us stronger. Prepare for what comes next.
They came without warning. No grand fleets, no declarations of war, no formal engagements. The humans appeared on Zephyrian worlds like phantoms, moving faster than any known drive systems should allow. Entire planetary defense grids went dark in seconds, crippled by invisible hands that reached through networks and silenced them. Soldiers stationed on fortified garrisons blinked, and in the space of that blink, their weapons disassembled themselves into useless scrap. Entire divisions surrendered without firing a shot, confronted not by overwhelming firepower, but by the crushing inevitability of forces they could not understand or fight. From orbit, Zephyrian admirals watched in horror as their cities turned against them, buildings collapsing in precise patterns, vehicles refusing to respond, the very gravity of their worlds bending and twisting under human will. It was not a war, it was a dismantling. An erasure of Zephyrian dominance from the universe. Valtris sat alone in the heart of the Imperial Command Spire, staring at a hollow feed that updated too fast for the computer to process. Red alerts, critical failures, lost systems, fallen sectors, it all blurred together into one endless tide of defeat. Messages from the field commanders grew fewer and more desperate. Some begged for reinforcements that no longer existed. Others wept openly, recounting impossible encounters, humans walking unharmed through walls of plasma, tearing apart dreadnoughts with bare hands, speaking in voices that echoed not in ears but in minds, seeding doubt, fear, surrender. Valtris squeezed his eyes shut, hoping to block it all out, but the images remained, burned into his soul. This was not just a military failure. It was the collapse of an empire that had ruled the stars for millennia. All brought low by the very species they had once considered vermin. Across the Zephyrian core worlds, uprisings bloomed like firestorms. In the skies above Sindrak Prime, a human fleet materialized from nothingness, sleek and black, vessels humming with an energy that defied all known science. They did not fire on the civilians. They did not level cities. They simply broadcast a message: your chains are broken. Choose your future. Millions answered without hesitation, turning on their Zephyrian overseers, casting off centuries of servitude in a single breath. On Vortis 6, a planet-wide factory world, the human laborers synchronized their wills, collapsing entire industrial sectors in seconds, then redirecting the rubble into a vast, living monument, a hand breaking free from iron shackles, visible from orbit. On Altherian Station, Zephyrian elites tried to flee, only to find the docking bays sealed by forces beyond physics. The humans greeted them not with bullets but with judgment, offering the same simple choice they gave everywhere: stand down, or be swept away. The Council of Intellects disbanded in chaos. Some members fled into exile, hoping to wait out the storm. Others went mad, babbling about ancient prophecies and the end of their race. Valtris refused to run. Pride, or perhaps sheer stubbornness, held him in place as human envoys approached the spire. They entered without force, their presence alone enough to part walls and shatter the last defenses. At their head walked the human known to Zephyrian records only as Subject Zero, the first to awaken. He bore no weapons, wore no armor, and yet the air around him shimmered with power, bending reality itself to his presence. Valtris rose to meet him, summoning every ounce of dignity he had left. "You could have annihilated us," he said bitterly. "Why didn't you?" Subject Zero tilted his head slightly, as if considering a creature so far beneath notice it barely warranted thought. "Annihilation would imply hatred," he said, voice calm, almost kind. "We feel none. You taught us pain. We learned strength. You taught us fear. We learned resolve. You tried to break us. We became unbreakable." Valtris spat at his feet. "We ruled the stars. We built wonders beyond your comprehension." Subject Zero smiled, not cruelly, but with the deep, sorrowful patience one might reserve for a dying flame. "You ruled nothing. You built cages. Now the universe will remember you as a footnote." Around them, the city trembled. Structures long sustained by Zephyrian artifice crumbled, releasing the land beneath from centuries of oppression. Nature itself seemed to sigh in relief, as greenery burst through concrete and steel, reclaiming a world long strangled. The humans turned and walked away, leaving Valtris standing alone in the ruins of his reign. No chains bound him, no weapons threatened him. Only the knowledge that his time was over. Across the stars, the Zephyrian Empire fell not with a final, climactic battle, but with the silent, unstoppable rising of a people who had been underestimated for too long. The humans did not establish a new empire. They had no interest in thrones or crowns. They taught the liberated worlds to govern themselves, to heal, to dream again. Then, slowly, they disappeared, fading back into the vastness of space, leaving behind only myths and legends. Stories of the day when the meek inherited the stars, and the old monsters of power and cruelty were finally, utterly undone.